So welcome to our corporate presentation. So we're here today, and I'll say after a few years of not being able to be in person, I know there's not a lot of folks here, but I actually really appreciate it. So I appreciate those that are able to make it in person. And I also appreciate those that are online. And really, I'm hoping through this, we can share a little bit about ExxonMobil, kind of what we're about, and careers in corporate finance in a multinational, and in particular, our treasurer's organization in ExxonMobil. So we'll talk a little bit about those things, and then we're going to leave some time, a good bit of time really for questions and discussion. So I don't know if we can, are we going to be able to get questions from the Zoom people, or I don't know. Well, if we will, okay. All right, super. So anyways, we'll have an opportunity for all of that. But first, let me start with some introductions. So my name is Doug Wesniak, graduated 27 years ago. I've joined ExxonMobil in our treasurers group at that point. I currently run our affiliate finance portion of treasurers. And what that is we're essentially responsible for the financing through loans and equity and other arrangements for our subsidiary companies around the world. So we have about 1,000 companies incorporated around the world, and our group provides the funding for those operations. Over my career, I won't go into all the details, had lots of other roles in different geographies, in different parts of finance, different parts of the business. Something that, and not only for myself, but also for Ian and Matt, something that's very typical is we do a lot of job rotation. So I'm not going to go through all the details. It is something in the Q&A. If anyone's interested, I think we're happy to share more about those experiences. But I mention it because it is really an important part of a role in corporate finance in a multinational. It's about getting many different experiences in many different areas of finance over the course of one's career, and really learning through that on-the-job experience. So with that, let me hand it over to Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So Ian Nesselrote, similar to Doug, graduated here a little bit more recently, though. So the class of 2014. As Doug said, we do rotate through a lot. So I've been a little bit more on the extreme end of that. I'm in my 9th rotation now, nine years into the job. And currently the global chemicals FP&A manager in our product solutions company, which is the new spin out of our combination downstream, heritage downstream and chemicals platforms. Have been in the upstream, downstream chemicals business line corporate. So it is a nice opportunity within Exxon to really get a breadth of experience within the industry and industrials space without having to jump companies, still having that same platform.
Matt Plunkett, Ian and I were here at the same time, so I graduated 1 year after him, helped recruit me to Exxon. I guess similar story rotations. Currently in an FP&A group covering our Rocky Mountain and West Coast fuels business, managing the business analysis team, we call it. And I'll be shortly heading back to upstream treasurers for my first assignment through the upstream business. So,
Okay, great. All right, if you guys want to,
we can
grab a
go back in
seat.
the shadows here.
All right, so we got just a few slides we're going to go through, not a whole lot, but again, just to start with, one thing that I think is really a topic that's on everybody's mind is, what are we in ExxonMobil and what are we as a society doing about the challenges of climate change? And so I want to start with this statement of one of our goals as a company is to advance climate solutions while also continuing to power the economies around the world. So what does that mean? It means leveraging the things that we do well, our core capabilities that allow us to continue to invest in projects that can responsibly and safely provide the energy and the products that society demands and wants and needs that to sustain our way of living, while also developing new solutions, new technologies that can further help address the challenges of climate change. And so as a company, we are committed to the Paris Agreement, the goals established in the Paris Agreement. But we're also committed to again, providing the products, whether it's chemical products or fuels or other products that society relies on every day. And we're also committed to continuing to provide attractive opportunities for all of our stakeholders, including our shareholders, which means investing responsibly in the projects that we do get involved in, regardless of the space of that investment. So, as mentioned here on the page, we are an industry leader in pretty much all the areas of the activities that we are involved in. And in that leadership, there really are 5 key strategic focus areas for us where we're seeking to not only maintain the leadership, but ultimately build that leadership position. So those 5 key strategic focuses are scale, integration, technology, functional excellence, and people. So let me just talk about each of those a little bit. What does that mean? So scale. So we have the opportunity to invest at a size and a scale of projects that frankly most of our competitors can't do, that create economies of scale, that create allow us to access things where the financial requirements are larger than many can handle. So it gives us an opportunity to both use our scale to then further build advantages in some of the projects that we can get involved in. Integration. So we have different parts of our business. We'll just briefly touch on, but not go in depth, but we can talk on the Q&A more. But upstream, downstream, chemicals, we have trading organization. We have a new business called Low Carbon Solutions. We'll talk about a little bit later. All of these, by participating through the value chain, we have more opportunity to maximize the value from the initial discovery of hydrocarbons to the ultimate use, and also how that fits into the portfolio of developing other low carbon solution businesses. So how these all fit together and having that integration creates a number of opportunities for us. Technology. So technology has always been a key focus area for us. We're a science-based company, always looking to develop new technologies to make our existing operations better, but also looking at other breakthrough types of technologies, whether it's doing research in biofuels or carbon capture and sequestration, which again is is an area of focus in our new business, Low Carbon Solutions. So looking to continuously develop technologies that can advance attractive investments across the spectrum of existing types of business areas, as well as the low carbon area. Functional excellence, the 4th area. So what does that mean? That means kind of being best in class. So we have a pretty long history of being one of the top operators in what we do, from a safety, from a reliability standpoint, as well as if we take it closer to home in the finance area. So we have a long history of developing innovative financing solutions in the area of security, structured finance, securitized finance, project financing. So doing things that are kind of best in class and leveraging those things that we do particularly well to continue to maintain that leadership position. And then last is people. So people is the 5th strategic area, and that's really what it all comes back to, right? Because it's the people that are going to do all this. So part of why we're here today is to continue to bring in the best, to provide career-long training opportunities, and putting people immediately into roles where they can have a meaningful impact and do challenging work very early on in one's career, and to help develop folks to be, again, kind of best in class as an organization. So with all of that, our goal and what we're working towards is to continue to maintain that industry leadership and build new businesses that can be globally competitive, and really provide opportunities for our people while providing returns for our shareholders, while also helping to develop new business areas that can help support society's goals around a lower carbon future. So as an industry leader, we also recognize that we have a very important role to play in what we kind of describe here as the dual challenge. And the dual challenge is, how can we, as a company, as an industry, and as a society, support the ongoing economic development of the world, providing the energy that people need to live, particularly in growing, developing economies where there's an increasing middle class that is growing as the population grows, and all of these things create more demands for energy and other similar, chemical and other products. Can we continue to provide that to allow that growth to happen while also addressing the challenges of climate change? And this is where I did want to talk a little bit more about this new business area for us called low carbon solutions. So we reorganized our company to three main business pillars, if you will: an upstream, our product solutions, which deals with fuels and chemicals, and our low carbon solutions. And this is an area that's really interesting and exciting because it's basically an opportunity to go and invest and develop a whole suite of new technologies, whether, again, biofuels and hydrogen are certainly possibilities out there, things we're looking at. But one that we actually have decades of experience in is what's called carbon capture and sequestration, which is basically taking carbon and re-injecting it down into the earth where it can be safely stored, for forever, well, for a long time. I don't know, forever, probably. But that's something that we have done for a long time. We're an industry leader already, but we're really looking to actively grow that in a step change way where we can do it in a scale that, frankly, no one else can do, and can have a meaningful impact on the working towards the goals of the Paris Agreement and overall kind of climate objectives to try and mitigate the carbon impact. So these are things that are not easy, though, where we're to find the balance between continuing to allow economies to develop with the products they need while also developing these other technologies and weaving them into the portfolio. It's certainly not easy, but that is something that we are very focused on as a company. So that's all I was really going to say about our kind of company and kind of where we are and some of the activities we're going in. So next, we wanted to shift the gears a little bit and talk in a little more detail about our actual careers in the finance area.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. All right, so Doug already mentioned at a very high level how the company is actually broken down, right? So the current state, and this has changed over the past few years, there are three operating segments of the company. We have the upstream business, which effectively is now a combination of what used to be standalone exploration, development, and production companies, as well as ventures organizations there where we do a lot of bolt-on acquisition type work, research into a different organization that's with standalone computing, all of that. Product solutions, which is now the combination of what used to be two standalone entities, are chemicals and downstream fuels and lubricants business. Recently, April 1st, actually, of 2022, these two companies came together and, effectively what's a Fortune 10 integration that we're still working through at the moment to better take advantage of some of the synergies that naturally exist between both of those operating platforms. Most of the places around the world, our refineries and chemical plants are connected to each other. There's a whole lot of synergies there. The way we've operated historically, even from a finance standpoint, has been very much tied together between the two companies, but there was a lot of opportunity to more holistically combine there and get a bit more efficient in how we deliver our solutions for customers. And then lastly, low carbon solutions, which is really a nascent standalone business for us. In reality, most of the activities are embedded within the other functions, right? So carbon capture and sequestration is likely to be something that is developed in conjunction with something in our product solutions business, call it a refinery, a chemical plant, in the upstream business, which houses our LNG facilities, right? All of those types of opportunities go together very well. Hydrogen, blue hydrogen. We've already announced and are building a world scale blue hydrogen plant at our Beaumont refinery down on the Gulf Coast. So that really is kind of an overall portfolio of opportunities for enhancing the environmental remediation and climate development aspects of the other two businesses, right? So how does that tie into finance? Effectively, our finance folks reflect the nature of the business, right? So when we have upstream exploration, upstream development businesses, we have to have finance people to sit alongside the commercial parts, or in many cases, actually fill some of the roles in the commercial aspects of those businesses. LNG SPAs, LNG developments, all of that fills within what we would call upstream business services. So I think all of us here in this group have spent at least a portion of our career either in the upstream business services or in commercial or planning and strategy roles within the upstream business as well. Similarly, in product solutions, you'll have a large business services group on the treasurer side supporting all of the divestments, M&A, economics modeling, all items like that you would expect to have a finance partnering with the business to help ensure that the right decisions, or at least the finance critical aspects of decisions are well thought through and delivered with the type of standards you would expect from a world scale company like ExxonMobil. Low carbon solutions, because it's such a new opportunity for the company, I think there's a really great platform for our finance people to be extremely engaged with the business development aspects, because that's really where we're focusing a lot of our energy right now. So effectively, some of the top people in that entire organization have hailed from the finance groups. So if you think about what we really do within treasurers, which is the main opportunity that we're going to discuss here, it's pretty much nose to tail what you would think of a bank or an internal finance consultant, but we try to keep as much of that in-house as humanly possible, right? So M&A advisory, divestment advisory, capital markets, cash management, some of the more traditional treasurers items, credit, things like that fall under that scope, as well as broad, as I mentioned, business services, which is really anything finance or economics related that you could possibly think of that comes up in the day-to-day operations of one of these businesses. It's a really unique opportunity to get broad exposure across the energy value chains, which are constantly evolving, without really having to take the high friction step of changing companies, right? I've had, in 9 jobs, something like 6 different careers already at once. And I've been able to do that all at the same company, which is relatively rare. We are over time growing kind of more closely with some of the other finance functions, the tax folks, the controllers, and business analytics groups, to try to further hone kind of our overarching mandates and our ability to intermingle the types of career development and core capabilities that we're recruiting for. So definitely with treasurers, you should be expecting to spend some time in more likely the kind of broad controllers business analysis groups that Matt and I are both doing spins in right now. I will tell you, I'm definitely not an accountant. And neither are most of the folks who kind of come in and out of those groups, because the reality is you really aren't doing the types of things you would think of as an accountant per se. It's really more after things have been booked, how do you manage the insight generation, the bridging of the gap between folks in the business development and the commercial side, and the numbers that come out of the systems, right? Someone's got to be able to tell that story, turn it into something that's digestible. And that's really what we see our finance people doing to add a lot of value in those conversations. So internships specifically, it's a bit unique from what I've seen versus a lot of my classmates and colleagues who came out of Tepper went through. We break it up into 2 different projects over a summer, right? Because there is a view that getting you kind of a microcosm of that rotational experience early on can give you a great feel for what your real career could be like at Exxon, because the rotations never stop. The ability to extrapolate your learnings here at Tepper and as you go throughout the job into new and unfamiliar areas is something that is critical to really develop during your career with Exxon. So we're going to get you 2 different 6-week, I think it's still 6-week each, right? So 12-week total-ish, Doug. It's been COVID changed things just a wee bit. So I think we're getting back on standard fare.
Yeah, I think it has obviously over the COVID period, things adjusted a little bit. Actually, last year, I think we just to manage everybody, to minimize travel between locations and things. We actually did one 10-week project. So it can vary, but the idea is
We're getting
the
back
same,
towards-
the idea is to have either one or two projects to get a feel for, different parts of the organization. It also depends on the scope and scale of the project and so forth.
And there's probably a little bit more flexibility to structure that project specifically now that we're all going to be over time in our new kind of single consolidated location in Houston. All of the projects are focused on something that the business actually needs. We thin staff, treasurers is an expectation that you will wear broad hats. And because of that, there's lots of small specific projects that folks generally don't have the time to get to that are perfect to bring someone in from an internship, get them a dip into the day-to-day operations, and also get that kind of two-way street to see how an individual fits within the culture of the company. I think it's fantastic on your resume to get into Exxon to show the skills. You can definitely provide yourselves a leg up on coming back with a full-time opportunity. We prefer to do as much of our hiring as humanly possible from our intern pool. So it's a great opportunity to kind of get a leg up on that. And also learn something that's extremely overall approachable to other types of industries as well, right? So the type of work we do day to day, regardless if it's in the energy industry or any other type of area in which folks may have interest over the long term, being able to problem solve in kind of an unstructured environment, show that leadership capability of taking something from a financial theory basis and turning it into a real actionable, pragmatic solution is certainly a skill that you're going to want to hone over the next few years of your career, right? So I think at this point, we'll save any questions about that to the Q&A. We'll go ahead and hand it over to Matt to give you a little bit of additional information about why ExxonMobil.
There was a nice picture of our Antwerp refinery there.
Yeah.
But before my MBA, I was in engineering, and it always amazed me how complex our refineries can be, even though it sort of comes down to boiling oil to make gasoline at the end of the day, right? But yeah, why ExxonMobil? So you can read the statement there. It may not be apparent from the composition of the group here, but Exxon is very much focused on diversity. That's not just diversity of how people sort of look or where they come from, but it's diversity of thought. I think there was a recognition that Exxon had a little bit of groupthink over the last couple decades that led to some investment decisions that may have been regretted. And so there is this big focus on diversity and a more inclusive work environment and trying to hear out many different thoughts and opinions. So just some statistics on that: nearly 70% of our campus hires are women. As part of our US workforce, about 30% are minorities. I think there's a recognition in our sort of executive and senior staff that there's been a gap in some of the pipeline development. So you'll see some of the external hires that we've had recently to help sort of fill that gap. So Kathy Michaels, our CFO, coming over from Diageo, which is an interesting transition into our business. And then Jennifer Driscoll, right, investor relations head, coming over from Caterpillar. So that there has been a really strong push to try to embed diversity and inclusion in everything that we do to help meet society's evolving needs for the energy that Doug had talked about. So employee resource groups, there's a new hire group that's across the Houston campus called One. There's one specifically for finance folks less than 5 years. They do a lot of fun things like go to Astros games, host happy hours, things like that, sports leagues. Regardless of sort of the affinity group or heritage that you come from, there's the benefit of a large company, 10,000 sort of capacity campus that we have. There's something for everybody. So, we've got a Black employee success team. We've got a Latino group. We've got a veterans group. We've got an Asian heritage group. We've got a Middle Eastern group that I enjoy going to Turkish coffee with. So, there's really, a great support network available. One of the benefits of a large company. So no matter, your sort of background or interest, there's a group to sort of join and help you in your career. And just to wrap it up, just sort of in summary, challenging assignments, opportunity for diverse finance focus, that one company that Ian sort of mentioned, I've worked on things as vast as catastrophic corporate insurance, which is not something you think you would normally encounter in a corporate finance type role, but we do have a risk management and insurance group within the treasurer's organization, down to sort of an FP&A team, as I mentioned, in the Rockies and West Coast fuel business here. Strong employee development program through job rotation and training. So we hit on the frequent job rotations. Training, I'll say, is more sort of on the job. Generally get a nice handover from the person that you're replacing and sort of learn, drinking from the fire hose as you do here at Tepper, as we say. Work with an exceptional team. So there's a lot of smart folks at Exxon, a lot of smart folks in treasurers. So there's a lot of folks to learn from, a lot of experience to draw upon. And then a world-class company. Doug touched on a lot of this with a huge global presence. So it provides, a ton of opportunities that, sort of hard to come by in one company, while also, truly having a positive impact on society and trying to bring communities along with us in the places that we invest. Industry leader in safety, financial strength, and portfolio of opportunities. So that picture there is probably one of our drill ships. Not sure which one. Guyana maybe. Yeah. So with that, I think we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So 9 rotations.
Mhm.
So do you move around? You stay in one location most of the time, or do you move?
So it can vary. I've actually only, in 9 rotations, I've only been in 2 locations, right? So I think over the past, say, 10 or 15 years, probably since you've been with the company, there's been a concerted effort to try to allow people to maintain the highly rotational culture without disrupting people's families as much, right? So we've centralized a little bit more so that you have more jobs in one location. For example, in Houston, while we used to have the same very, very large presence in Houston, everyone was broken up in offices all over Houston. And Houston's the size of Rhode Island. So if you end up going from one rotation in chemicals to a rotation in upstream, which is very normal, you could have an hour change in your commute. So the company realized that this was a bit of a difficult situation for families, and they invested in the campus to get all of those jobs together. So you can rotate without a lot of change. Of course, they still maintain the opportunity for international assignments. We still have people, traveling depending on which position you're in, but it doesn't kind of take the same toll that it used to when you were back and forth a lot more often on folks.
Yeah, and so maybe just to add a little bit to what Ian was saying. So like, for my career is 27 years now, but I spent 3 years in Belgium and 3 years in Singapore, and then multiple places around the US. And so there's still those opportunities.
Mhm.
So we still are constantly, our footprint is shifting and changing. And so as we grow in places like Guyana, where that drill ship is from, we've been building a huge organization there, and we're sending people down, including finance people, to help build that organization in Guyana. In other places, where we're shrinking the organization. And so some of the historical opportunities, where some of the locations, those change over time. So that's constantly evolving. There always will continue, because we are a global company. There's always going to be opportunities outside the base. But as Ian was saying, when we, some years ago, 5-6 years ago, built this big campus in Houston, the idea was to allow people to have one home base while still having the international responsibilities through just geographic responsibility, through travel, through things like that. So there's definitely more focus to minimize how often people move, but job rotation is still part of it. So there's always going to be a balance there. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. One pertaining to the rotation. How do those rotations actually take place? Do you have to apply for the next role? Is it predetermined? What is the company need at the time?
Yeah, so there's several things that go into that. So there's ongoing, employee supervisor discussions, and in those, there's several important things to come out. One is there is what are one's interests. There is what is the business need, and what is a third, which is what do we think as an organization, as a management, would be useful or valuable from a development standpoint. So those 3 can individually kind of lead to different things, but we try and factor all 3 in when looking at one's next role. So we don't have a nomination or a posting where you apply for a job. there's a discussion. Management will kind of say, well, what are you interested in? What are your development needs? Maybe you've worked in cash management and we'd like you to work in the pension area, or we'd like you to get to business services and start doing some economic evaluation or whatever. And then what are the needs of the business? So our business footprint shifts, as I was mentioning, and so that can create new opportunities, and also means some of the other roles, maybe, some go away and others are created in the process. So matching up those three kind of helps then lead to identifying what's that next role. And then there'll be a discussion, say, hey, look, this is the next role. We'd like you to go take this. And usually, there's a constructive conversation around that. And then we'll again, with the principle that constantly, or not constantly, but periodically rotating to get new experiences in new parts of the business, new geographies, new parts of finance is key. And so we want people to embrace that. And if one does, usually matching up those three items, it's not always exactly what one is thinking. I know that's been the case for me at times, and probably you guys as well, where you say, oh, I really was thinking this, and we come up with something else. But over time, that's something that's tended to work out pretty well. So that's our approach. You said you had a second question.
How is Exxon adapting to like kind of post-pandemic working? Is everybody returning to the office? Is there a hybrid?
You want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as a company, we do sort of value people being in the office and the collaborative nature of it. We have this big, huge campus that we build, right, where it's sort of an open office environment to help encourage a lot of those conversations. But we do have a very nice workplace flexibility policy. And so it allows you, if you have, something you need to take care of at home or with your kids, for all of us, I guess, have that scenario. It's not a problem to go work from home for a day or two, or go to another state and work from home, work another country for a couple of weeks. Generally up to the sort of supervisor discretion within, some bounds of, there's sometimes tax implications if you're, in another country for too long working and things like that. But yeah, I would say we have a workplace flexibility that allows for, a lot of discretion between the supervisor and the employee.
But just to add on though, there's not like a fixed, 3 days in the office, 2 days off. It's more meant to be managed individually and ad hoc with a general, we were talking about this earlier today. As a company, we're encouraging people to generally be in the office when they can. But obviously behaviors have shifted the last few years because of the pandemic, and the ability to work remotely has become much more accessible than anyone kind of realized it could be, I think, before that. So there's still a balancing going on what's that right mix, but we have very flexible policies that say, look, you need to be out, you need to be somewhere else, no problem. We are not currently encouraging people to go and just work from home all the time. We want people to generally go and be in a more collaborative environment, but it's kind of person and group specific and how that's kind of evolving, and it is still evolving.
Yeah, and the company will say we've always had that policy in place, but people were afraid to use it. It's really been a change since COVID that people are actually using the policy now. So
I work from home most Fridays.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think I have a couple of questions. So going back to utilization, you guys have been great. How do you think this contributed to your growth and development as a finance professional? And then the second question has to do with you mentioned Exxon's transition to like creating a third business unit, to go carbon business unit. From a finance perspective, are you guys like dealing with the financial risk coming from that transition to a low emission economy, as based on renewables and all of that financial business on that?
Sure. So maybe I'll start with the second one, and then maybe you can come back on that first one. So on that second one, so in our corporate strategic planning group, they spend a lot of time really trying to think and gathering data from various, IEA and EIA and other multinationals and banks and others on what are all the different scenarios out there that people, economists and others are saying might happen with. If we meet the Paris Agreement at 2 degrees Celsius, what does that mean for energy consumption? If we don't, or, what are all these different scenarios that might play out? And so they really actively try and think about all of that. Well, we have our own internal view, but really trying to think about all the possible scenarios. And with that, then trying to say, all right, let's build our portfolio. And I say build because we have a huge portfolio, but in the last few years, we've really been refreshing a lot of that. We've been investing in some big new areas like Guyana and the Permian and in various LNG markets. And we've been getting out of some of the more historical mature areas. And so as we're refreshing that portfolio, there's a lot of focus to say, well, what are robust investments in all of these scenarios? And can we, as we're looking at these new opportunities, what can we do to stay flexible? So if government policy speeds up and around the world, the adoption of policies, whether it be through a carbon tax or other things, accelerate, what can we do to shift more activity into our low carbon solution business to take advantage of that? Or if policies drag their feet and they're slow and the transition's slow, what are the businesses that we can continue to invest in profitably and efficiently and safely that can support that? And having that flexibility in the portfolio is something that's actively looked at and really a focus item now, recognizing that there's a lot of uncertainty out there about what the future, how these transition over these next decades. How is it really going to play out? I'm not sure anybody really knows, but we want to position ourselves to be able to take advantage no matter how fast or slow these transitions do occur.
Yeah. As far as the rotations, I think that really is something that drives you to become much more flexible in how you approach problems, how you approach not having a historical background in an area of responsibility. So you learn how to get used to being uncomfortable with the unknown and needing to prioritize from scratch. And each one of your rotations, that becomes a bit easier, right? It is kind of its own skill that you develop over time. And I think broadly beyond a work setting, it's actually extremely useful from a lifestyle and decision-making concept. What's important, what isn't, how do you prioritize effectively? How do you get uncomfortable drawing upon resources that are not folks that you've interacted with historically on a day-to-day basis, but being able to leverage outside networks to build that competency in a relatively short time frame. I think it's an unintentional skill set that gets built up by the company, just as a part of the broader, much more intentional view of building an extremely competent cross-value chain energy professional.
You?
I'm the one, first to be here. I think you answered my first question, Henry's first question. Sure. What's the company's value vision behind like me and Mark, you guys have probably like 9 years to 8 years more or less. Like, what does the next sort of 2 years look like for you? Because doesn't have like much more sort of time in there, so it's probably short in that regard. But like, what's the next 5 years for you? But that's the question I can answer.
It's a good question. You never, even at Doug's time in the company, you never stop rotating. I mean, Doug,
Unless you're Doug.
and
Wow.
you found an area you
Intercompany
really
lending
love
niche.
and built yourself a specialty, maybe. But even Doug may explore new frontiers, right? So
Yeah, so I think what Ian's trying to say is that, those 3 principles I talked about of personal interest, development need, and need of the business, whether you're 10 years in, 1 year in, or 27 years in, those are all still something that we actively discuss in management. Say, well, Ian's had lots of different experiences now, 9 roles in 9 years, but there could be other areas that we say, this would be a good area to further develop, and there's an opportunity. So I don't know what that next one will be, and you don't know what that next one will be, but there are regular discussions that take place to say, look, let's make sure, if you've got restrictions and, for example, some people, because of a family situation, they might not want to move overseas or something like that, or there could be all sorts of things. So we have that dialogue regularly. We encourage that dialogue, both not only for what one wants to do, but also where there's constraints. And so it's in some sense, you could say that means it's a little unclear what the next 5 years means, but as long as you're doing things that are meaningful and challenging, then I think, certainly for me, that's been a key to it. I've learned in every role I've had throughout the company. I did things I wasn't thinking I was going to do. When I went to Singapore, I was the controller for all of our Asia Pacific downstream and chemical businesses, responsible for the statutory reporting under different IFRS standards in like 12 different countries. And they're all different standards, and trying to manage those reporting, which gets filed with the local government, gets filed with the tax returns and all these things. And I, going in, I wasn't quite sure, I didn't know much about that, to be honest, but I ended up learning a lot from it that ended up carrying over and being extremely valuable in my current role, where I've established a little bit of a niche for myself, running the affiliate finance organization, providing the financing to all these affiliates. Well, understanding how the local accounts kind of work has given me some insights that I'm able to use now. So you don't always know how it's going to come together, but through the regular dialogue, we just try and make sure that we can do things that meet the employees' development while also meeting the business needs.
I think one of the big things is most of the jobs, you wouldn't have known to ask for that type of, the company has such a breadth that one of the reasons I have absolutely no idea what I'm likely to do yet is because I've learned at this point that I never would have even realized there was an opportunity to do certain things, right? So the scope is pretty wide, and it's impossible to really have your pulse on what could possibly come up next. So you kind of just trust the system, have the conversations, and it's a bit of an iterative situation at times, but there's going to be something there.
Yeah, and for folks that are doing well and continuing to demonstrate strong performance and have a willingness to learn new things and be challenged, there's going to continue to be new opportunities. Because that's one thing is, we are still a big company. We operate in like 100 countries around the world. We have some big centers where we have finance expertise, beyond in the US, obviously, but in many other places. And so the opportunity set is there, and it's just a matter of matching it up for folks.
It's not the point of like overseas and work and involved for the global nature. As we guys plan our careers, like a big part of what excites me is the globality of the work that one would do. And how much of the work that you guys do right now involves like that part, right? Like without sort of having to look at locations outside the US maybe. It's like what nature does it sort of bring with it?
I cover, as I mentioned, a Rockies West Coast fuels business right now. So I've got an actual asset sitting in Billings, Montana that I interact with all the time, folks there. But then we have accounting centers all over the world in Budapest, in Buenos Aires. So we're constantly talking with them. There's a group in India that deals with invoicing our customers, and so interact with them. And then in 2 weeks, I'm going to be working on a PNG Papua LNG financing with maybe some work in Australia. So I think every job has aspects where you're interacting all over the place. Yes,
It's a very global business.
On a Zoom stand, we're very curious to see like how it operates from the inside in the US.
Oh yeah, talk to people internationally daily, I would say, probably.
Yeah, sure. One more question. How much of your work is strategy related? In terms of, developing strategy going forward for Exxon as it is to kind of operations, where the most more platform?
I think it depends on the role, right? I mean, we've all probably been in different strategy roles. I've been in upstream strategy, the group that just focused on that. Been a part of a lot of other strategy studies. We refresh different strategies for different parts of the business, all the way down to the product level on certain cycles. So it just depends.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, so we have a corporate strategic planning group, and then within the business streams, they have strategy groups. So clearly those roles, and people rotate through them. Their whole job is to kind of think about the strategy and how the portfolio fits in. Other roles, some of them, it varies. Some may have very little. So for my current team, so we're not developing corporate strategy, but at the same time, we're responsible for how all of our companies around the world, how they're financed. So we have to put financing strategies in place on how best to manage the affiliate in Australia, which is different from Canada, which is different from Thailand, which is different from Belgium. And so there are financing strategies that we'll develop, and in our upstream or down product solutions business services. For example, we're doing a big new investment in China, and working out a financing plan, a financing strategy for that has its own unique elements. And so it depends on the role, and then other roles there might be less of that. So it just varies.
You guys can just take like one, maybe two more questions because we started with the.
Okay. Can I ask, is there any Zoom questions? Anybody that has a question? I don't know. Is there?
Not yet, but
No.
We didn't see.
Okay. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah.
One of the slides in your presentation, there's a bullet point that said that you guys handle a lot of like the investment banking functions in-house. Can you expand on that a little bit? Like you underwrite bonds and then issue like affiliates, finance, like I guess how does all that work?
Yeah, we do a lot of different items, right? So we have in-house banks that effectively run under Doug's team, where we like to do a lot of our own lending. We will borrow centrally, primarily in the commercial paper market, due to cost efficiencies, and then we will co-lend in the most tax efficient manners, along with even third parties in cases of structured financing into ventures all over the world, right? At the same time, we handle most of our divestment work, handle most of our M&A type work in-house, the DD pieces of the acquisition, all of the customer interfacing, the transition work, all of that stuff.
And just to be clear, so we will still bring in banks.
Yeah,
To execute certain pieces of it, but we'll tend to do as much of the analysis and the structuring and the planning and all of that work, and as much of the execution as we can in-house. So the acquisition, the divestment's a great example. So we basically kind of do it all, and then we'll still bring in advisors to help, close the deal. Or another example, a couple of years ago, we did a $5 billion Euro bond. So the corporation, we issue bonds, to raise financing. We decided to do a Euro bond instead of a dollar bond. We did all the analysis and planning in-house, but then to actually market it, we obviously had to bring in banks to go and get the bonds placed. So there's still an interaction there, but we try and just do as much of the planning and analysis as we can to limit, the banks to be more supporting the execution of what we're doing.
I was wondering, is there any courses or any classes or anything that you recommend that we should take here while we're at Zephyr to succeed?
yeah, I would say
You're the
restructuring.
most recent grad for us.
Definitely
Testing our memories.
restructuring, corporate finance, options, real options would be the ones I would go for.
there's even a venture capital course at one
Yeah, that
point
was a
where they
good
did a
one.
lot of sort of economic analysis that I
Yeah.
actually found applicable, even though it was sort of a
High
different space. but-
uncertainty economic valuation is
Yeah,
really what
yeah.
it is, right? So, but anything like the real options class was very good. The options and derivatives class, restructuring, corporate finance.
Yeah, at the end of the day, again, particularly for us as a large multinational and our roles, I mean, it's called treasurers, and that can mean different things in different companies, but for us, it's really a broad scope of corporate financing activities. So, again, all these different things, and pension management, to cash management, to financing, to, all this stuff. The more you can do to learn about all the different areas of finance, they're all relevant because people get involved in all these different spaces over time. So anything finance related is probably at one point or another going to be relevant for something we're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right.
One question, please. One last one.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and I guess we're running out of time here. And we can we'll stick around if there's other stuff. But all right, last question.
When you say affiliates, right, like I'm assuming it's one of the 1,000 companies that ExxonMobil, like ExxonMobil owns. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah. So the terminology, when I say affiliate, these are typically 100% owned companies that are owned by ExxonMobil, but incorporated in other parts of the world. And so they're in our consolidated results. So when we report our earnings in the SEC and all that, but they're in separate jurisdictions, they're subject to their own laws and tax rules. And so we manage them, and they are managed separately and independently from a governance and a board standpoint. But we oversee much of the financial activities and how they interact with the rest of the company. Yeah. Okay, I guess that brings
We
us
should, like
to
formally
the end.
wrap it up.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming and presenting today, and thank you all of you for coming and asking questions. So, yeah.
Okay, thank